You're welcome. Okay.
What's that?
I think it is recording.
Yeah, it's recording
Okay.
now.
Alrighty.
I'll start us off with introducing everybody. All right. Hi, guys. I'm Kendra Tischer. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm a nonprofit management major.
I can go next if that's okay. All right. Hello, I'm Emma Rice. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and my major is music therapy.
Mara, you can go ahead.
Okay. I am Mara Schlosser. I am a political science major, and I am from Pittsburgh.
Okay. I'm Annie Dingson. I'm from Waynesboro, PA, and I am a Parks and Resource Management major.
Alrighty, let's get started. So before we get into all the articles, I just want to go over some basic concepts just to put into context what we're talking about. So most of our discussion will revolve around direct democracy. So direct democracy and ballot measures are sort of the most boiled down, simple version of democracy, where people vote directly on a policy instead of leaving that to representatives. And ballot measures are the way that's typically done in the United States. Many states, municipalities, counties, things like that will have ballot measures for voters to directly choose policy. For example, this is something that's done in Pennsylvania, and in Pittsburgh, the last election, there was a ballot measure to decide whether or not to create a new fund to manage city parks. So going into the ballot there, you just vote yes or no on that policy. Another important thing for our discussion here is that voting is different in every state. So some states do implement those direct democracy ballot measures, others do not. The other important thing about elections here is that some states run elections for judges. Others do not. Pennsylvania is one, so if you voted in Pennsylvania, you've probably voted on a judge. And that kind of leads into the last key concept here, federal courts versus state courts, where federal judges are appointed by the president, approved by the Senate, and then they have that job for life. State judges don't all have that luxury. Many of them have to face re-election, and that changes judicial behavior a little bit. So those are just some important things to keep in mind as we move forward here.
Okay, so I wanted to continue off of what Mara was discussing and talk about how the direct democracy and representative democracy differs for how it protects minorities. So the article that was listed first, I think, was discussed how direct democracy could be unfair to those in a minority because of how direct democracy works. Now, it could be argued that the other option of a representative democracy is not as consistent as it should be. There's groups of people that are representing others, I guess, instead of directly voting. I guess, you know what I mean? Okay. And some of this evidence, I was kind of like, what do you mean? But then the article talked about the Jim Crow laws and the anti-Catholic laws that were, yes, okay. So I wanted to question the crowd on something that I also felt bothered by, and I felt like there was more that could be discussed. And it was, do you feel that there are larger issues that should be discussed other than what was presented in the article? So the article discussed what pro-gay bills and anti-gay bills would present, but I feel like there are larger issues that could be presented, especially now that time has passed. Hopefully our viewers at home will be able to share their ideas with us. And another question that I had was, what are some other ways that minority rights are threatened by society through this process? So I guess my first question is how can we help? And the second question is, how is this damaging to these people in a minority? And I feel like I created this question because I know that our class is very diverse, and I think that a lot of ideas could really good ideas could come from those people that have different perspectives. So
All right. So the next article was on how Massachusetts got gay marriage back in 2004, and essentially the basic rundown of like how this came about was that the state court had the Goodridge case, and the state court just you know came to the conclusion that by banning same-sex marriage, it was unconstitutional. But instead of offering a solution and a remedy straight up front, they decided to delay the process and then give the opportunity for the General Assembly of Massachusetts to um, come up with a remedy of their own. And essentially, they were trying to mimic what was happening a year prior that worked successfully for Vermont for the Baker case. And essentially, um, the where Vermont did the remedial delay, and it allowed them to pass the idea of civil unions that would not necessarily recognize gay marriage, but it will at least offer the benefits and the rights to same-sex couples, kind of similar to a heterosexual couple. So but the main difference between Vermont and Massachusetts is, even though Massachusetts tried to pass that civil unions, um, the court ended up deciding that the idea of civil unions was also unconstitutional because of how it was frameworked, and for their bill. So that didn't end up working. So Massachusetts just was able to pass same-sex marriage without any backlash because of how they handled the situation. So one of and then so another key thing was that this whole article was also noting the importance of how to framework an issue and how language is used to sway public opinions, because you can ask the same question twice in different ways and you'll get a different response potentially. So that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to policymaking. It depends on how you use your language and how you framework it. So the key synopsis of the overall article, like a quote that I picked out, was that although legislator was responding to the constraint of popular opinion in the new circumstances of the Goodridge ruling, legislative action also shapes public opinion. Because something that happens a little bit quite often about like one reason why public opinion changes so much is that if a law or a bill is backed by more than one branch of government, public opinion is going to be more in favor of whatever that bill was stating. So one of seeing for the case of Massachusetts, seeing as they had other branches of government supporting same-sex marriage, Massachusetts was able to change the percentage of oppressed, or I mean those who were in favor of oppressing same-sex marriage to being in favor of it. So with the idea of like language, the question I have is like, what kind of feelings does the concept of moral values evoke, and why was it pivotal during the 2004 in creating a subsequential an increase of opposition of same-sex marriage? And then after that, are there any current political issues happening that you feel is being shaped by public opinion and or being shaped by the government? So yes, that's all I got.
All right. So the article that I did was, are Blacks and Latinos responsible for the passage of Proposition 8? And to start off with, Proposition 8 is a California ballot proposition that was passed in the November 2008 elections. This proposition stated that only marriage between a man and a woman was recognized in California, so it effectively banned gay marriage. But then later on in 2010, this proposition was then ruled unconstitutional, and it actually wasn't gotten rid of officially until 2013 because of its slow process getting through all the courts. And so also to answer this question that's posed by the article title, essentially no. The increase in rates of Black and Latino voters in 2008 didn't lead to the passage of Proposition 8. So basically in 2004, there was a total of 1.1 million Blacks and Latinos who had come out to vote on an earlier version of Proposition 8. And then in 2008, 1.7 million Blacks and Latinos had voted on this. And even though with that large increase, Proposition 8 would have still been passed in 2008. So they definitely are not to blame for that. And so my questions then are, wouldn't Blacks and Latinos want to support another minority? Or is it a case of they don't want to support a second minority because if a Black or Latino is LGBT, they become what I've termed a super minority. So is that like why they don't want to support that, so that way they avoid that situation happening? Or could it be more than one reason? And a possible reason that was posed by the article for you guys to think about when you're answering is that Blacks have a higher level of religiosity and affiliation when compared to whites, and that Black religious practices and affiliations have remained stable and constant for a long time. So that's one thing you can think about when you're answering this question. Or another thing that was posed by the article was that there's actually like a Black attitude formation and a socialization practice with them with how they grow up. So that's my first question. And then my next question is, using proper education combined with the advertising methods discussed in the study, do you think it's possible to eventually one day to get a majority of the public to understand and view the LGBT community positively, no matter religion, race, or ethnicity? And like examples of the advertising that was used in this article. So like before Proposition 8, like before that voting happened, there was those who opposed it and those who were for it. And both sides kind of tried to reach out to minority communities using Latino actors and actresses, Spanish American political leaflets and newspaper articles, as well as pre-recorded calls. And there was also like press conferences held by ministers who both supported and opposed Proposition 8, as well as rallies that were organized by churches themselves. So if there's a way that we can use anything like that, or even other examples that you might come up with, can we use that to reach out to all minorities, including like Asian minorities or even Native American minorities? Is there a way for us to reach them using advertising methods like this to change their opinion? That's my slide.
Okay, the last article in this section was Public Opinion and Judicial Behavior in Direct Democracy Systems. So this article discusses that courts are supposed to be insulated for public opinion, but it doesn't always work out that way. Like I mentioned before, a lot of judges have to face re-election, so they are beholden to the public in a very direct way. So it makes sense that public opinion would influence their decisions. And this article delves into some of the nuances with how public opinion affects judicial behavior. And in states where direct ballot measures are taken, there is a lot more pressure on judges to uphold those policies because it's viewed as the will of the people. There's also pressure and tension between judges and legislators. That's a big part of checks and balances of government, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But in states where direct democracy can be used for policymaking, that can influence legislators, it can influence judges, and it can cause legislators or judges to treat each other in certain ways. And that's really what this study was kind of delving into. And the key conclusion, this is a long quote, I apologize about that, but I'm going to read it anyway. By making judges accountable to the public through judicial elections and enhancing the role of the public in the policymaking process with direct democracy, the arrangement of electoral institutions in 21 states seems to make judicial decision-making more responsive to public pressure. So what this is saying is that in 21 states, there are electoral systems that allow both direct ballot measures and judicial elections. And in those 21 states where both of those electoral methods are present, judges are more likely to succumb to public pressure and mostly make decisions that uphold what the public has voted on. So unfortunately, because a lot of what we've talked about in this section and in previous classes too, direct democracy doesn't generally bode well for minority rights, including LGBT rights. So in states and municipalities where people can directly vote to restrict minority rights, if the judges in those areas are beholden to elections, it's very unlikely that they would block such a decision. So just a couple questions on this. Are federal judges more insulated from public pressure than state judges? And if so, are lifetime appointments for judges necessary? Again, federal judges are appointed and have that job for life, unless they're impeached. So they don't have to worry about so much public pressure. But that lifetime appointment is pretty unpopular. It's seen as subverting democratic will a lot of the time. So I'd love to hear from the class and see what you guys think about that. And should courts be able to overturn policies approved by direct ballot measures? Should such policies be scrutinized more or less than those implemented by legislators? So again, this is kind of a question on whether or not courts should be able to overrule what the majority has voted on. So I'm curious to hear what you think. If the general sides are that some people think that judges blocking direct ballot decisions interferes with the democratic process, is counter to the public will, all of that, while others see it as necessary in order to protect minority rights from these sort of majoritarian decisions that can often leave people behind. So yeah, let's kick up some discussion and see what everybody thinks. And that is our presentation. Thanks everybody for watching. And yeah, stay healthy.
Bye. Dramatic pause.
Dramatic pause while I try to figure out how to stop the recording.